Ethan Cole stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, the skyline stretching beneath him like a glittering empire he had conquered. The city pulsed with energy, his energy. Every major building that caught the light had a connection to him. Every successful merger carried his name somewhere behind the scenes. He was the kind of man people watched when he entered a room, not because he was loud or flashy, but because everything about him carried quiet authority. The tailored charcoal suit, the unflinching eyes, the kind of self-control that made others uneasy. To the world, Ethan Cole was untouchable. Until tonight, he didn't hear the note fall at first. It slipped from the folder his assistant had left on his desk, another stack of contracts awaiting his signature. But when his eyes landed on the familiar handwriting, something inside him froze. It was her handwriting, Emma's, his wife's. The elegant loops of her letters, always a little slanted to the right, a small quirk he used to tease her about. She hadn't written him anything in months, not since the silence between them had grown thicker than the walls of their home. But here it was, a folded piece of paper resting on the glass desk, small and unassuming, yet heavy enough to pull the air out of the room. He stared at it for a long time before touching it. His hand hovered above it, the way someone might hesitate before picking up a live wire. When he finally unfolded the paper, the first line made his pulse spike. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. He blinked once, twice. He read it again. Gone. The words didn't compute at first. Gone. Where? A trip. A hotel. The beach house in Malibu. But as his eyes moved down the page, the truth hit harder with every line. She wasn't talking about leaving for a while. She was talking about leaving him. Completely. The note wasn't long. It didn't need to be. It was written in Emma's calm, careful tone, the same tone she used when she decided something important, and there was no point in arguing. She wrote that she couldn't keep pretending everything was okay, that she had become invisible in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt hollow from within. She wrote that she had tried to reach him, tried to be patient, tried to understand, but somewhere along the way, she lost herself. And then, the line that shattered him completely, I think you even noticed when I stopped waiting for you to come home. Ethan sank into his chair, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. He could face boardrooms full of ruthless investors without flinching. But this was something else. A part of him wanted to get angry, to call it dramatic, emotional, unfair. But beneath that instinctive defense, something deeper cracked open. Because she was right, he hadn't noticed. He'd been too busy running companies, signing deals, expanding his empire, telling himself it was all for them, for their future. But the truth was, he'd stopped seeing her somewhere along the climb. The dinners he missed, the promises he postponed, the conversations he brushed off because his phone buzzed with urgent notifications. He used to look at her and see the person who grounded him. Lately, he only saw her as part of the background, always there, always waiting, until suddenly she wasn't. He picked up his phone. Her contact stared back at him. Emma. No response to his last 3 messages. No missed calls. He tried again, pressing call this time, but it went straight to voicemail. The calm tone of her recorded voice filled the silence. Hey, it's Emma. Leave a message. He didn't. He just sat there, listening until it beeped, then ended the call without saying a word. The city lights below blurred as rain began to fall, tapping against the glass. It was almost poetic, the storm outside, matching the chaos unraveling inside him. But there was no time for poetry. He needed to find her. Within minutes, he had his security chief on the line. Check the penthouse cameras. When did she leave? He ordered. His voice was steady, but his chest felt like it was on fire. The man hesitated. Sir, Mrs. Cole asked us to disable the private feed this morning. She said it was for privacy. Ethan's jaw clenched. And you believe that? Yes, sir. She had your written authorization. He froze. What? There was a pause, then the man added, it had your digital signature, verified through the system. Ethan swore under his breath. She had planned this. She knew how his security worked. She knew how to make it look legitimate. The realization sent a chill through him. Emma, his quiet, gentle Emma, had outsmarted him in his own world, and she'd done it flawlessly. He walked through the penthouse, every detail of their life together suddenly feeling foreign. Her favorite books still lined the shelves. Her sweater hung on the back of the sofa. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the hallway. Nothing seemed out of place, and that made it worse, because it looked like she could walk back in at any moment. smile, and say everything was fine. But the note said otherwise. Downstairs, his private driver waited in the lobby, confused when Ethan appeared without his usual composure. "Where to, sir?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't even know where to start. "Check the hangar," he said finally. If she had taken the jet, there'd be records. But when they arrived, the jet was still there. No flights scheduled. No departures logged under her name. He called the beach house. No answer. The staff hadn't seen her. He called her assistant. Voicemail. Every dead end made the silence louder. By midnight, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. It was Emma, standing by the ocean. Her hair blew across her face, the wind carrying strands like fine threads of gold. But what caught him wasn't her beauty, it was the look in her eyes. Peace. The kind of peace she hadn't had in years. Beneath the photo was a single line. "Don't look for me, please." His hands tightened around the phone. It felt like she was daring him to disobey. And she should have known. Ethan Cole never obeyed when it came to losing something that mattered. Within an hour, he had a team tracing the message, but whoever sent it was good. The signal bounced through multiple locations. Whoever helped her, because she wasn't doing this alone, knew what they were doing. The clock hit 2 a.m. when Ethan finally sat down again. The note lay in front of him, wrinkled now, its edges smudged from where his fingers had pressed too hard. He read it for what felt like the 100th time. Every word twisted the knife deeper. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profits, strategy, or control. He was thinking about the one person who had walked away because he made her feel unseen. His phone buzzed again, this time with an alert from his home security team. "Sir," the head of security said through the speaker, "someone accessed your private storage vault an hour before Mrs. Cole left." Ethan's head snapped up. "What did they take?" There was a pause. "We're still checking inventory, but it looks like the black box." His heart dropped. The black box wasn't just any item, it was his most private archive. A secure digital vault containing personal recordings, letters, and confidential projects. No one knew it existed except him and Emma. She didn't just leave him. She took something he had buried deep in his empire. Something that could destroy everything if it got out. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole wasn't the one in control. Ethan Cole wasn't used to silence. His world operated on noised, constant rhythm of phones buzzing, screens flashing, deals being made, and people waiting for his command. But that night, inside the glass walls of his penthouse, silence felt heavier than sound. It wrapped around him, pressing on his chest, reminding him of what he had lost. His wife was gone, and she had taken something far more dangerous than her presence, the black box that contained the one thing he'd never let anyone touch. For the first time, the man who controlled everything had no idea what to do next. He didn't sleep. He didn't even sit. By dawn, he was already at Cole Dynamics headquarters, a towering symbol of his empire that now felt like a hollow monument. The city outside was barely awake when he walked into the boardroom, every step echoing with authority that was beginning to crack beneath the surface. His team was their executives, cybersecurity experts, legal advisors, sore waiting for direction. Ethan didn't waste time. His voice was calm but sharp as a blade when he spoke. "Someone accessed my private vault. There's a missing item, the black box. I want to know how, when, and who helped her." His employees exchanged nervous glances, aware that their billionaire CEO was standing on the edge of fury. One of the IT analysts finally spoke, explaining that Emma could have used his biometric signature. "That's impossible," Ethan snapped, his tone dropping lower, "unless someone inside helped her replicate it." His head of security cleared his throat carefully. "Sir, are you suggesting Mrs. Cole had an accomplice?" Ethan didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed, eyes narrowing as if piecing together a puzzle that had been right in front of him all along. "Find out who it was," he said coldly. "Every contact, every message, every call. Start with her assistant, her driver, and anyone who's seen her in the last 72 hours, and do it quietly. If this leaks, I'll know who to blame." When the meeting ended, he stood by the glass wall of his office, looking down at the city he owned. He had built this world brick by brick, controlling every variable, every threat, every betrayal. But now the threat wasn't external, it was personal, intimate, and intelligent. The phone in his hand vibrated suddenly, cutting through his thoughts. A single text appeared on the screen from an untraceable number. Just one word: stop. Ethan stared at it, pulse tightening. It was her. It had to be. He typed quickly, "Where are you, Emma?" No reply came, only another message seconds later again, that single word, "Stop." It wasn't a warning, it was a plea. She wanted him to let her go, but letting go wasn't in his nature. He had spent his life taking control of everything he touched, and now he wasn't about to let his marriage, or his secrets, slip away into the hands of someone who might use them against him. He returned to his penthouse later that day and reviewed the security footage himself. The cameras showed Emma leaving at precisely 8:42 p.m. the night before, calm, composed, holding only a small overnight bag. She didn't rush, didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Then he noticed something else, a vehicle waiting at the curb, a dark grey SUV with tinted windows, not one of their cars. He zoomed in on the plate, but it was registered under an offshore company. He forwarded the clip to his head of security with a single message, "Find this vehicle." Hours later, the report came in. The SUV was registered to a shell corporation, connected to a familiar name, Liam Hart. The moment Ethan saw it, his entire body went still. Liam Hart was a name he hadn't heard in 2 years. Once a trusted member of his acquisition team, Liam had been brilliant but reckless, eventually caught leaking confidential data to a competitor. Ethan had destroyed him, fired him, sued him, and made sure no company would touch him again. And now, Liam was back, driving the car that took his wife away. The realization hit like a cold blade sliding under his skin. Emma didn't even know Liam Moore, so he thought. He called his intelligence chief, his voice low and steady, betraying nothing of the storm brewing beneath. "Get me everything on Liam Hart," he said. "Where he's been, who he's with, and what connection he has to my wife. I want answers tonight." When the report came through, Ethan read every word in silence. Liam had resurfaced under a new business name, a private equity group, aggressively targeting Coal Dynamics subsidiaries through indirect buyouts and acquisitions. It was smart, calculated, and deeply personal. Then came the photo. Attached to the file was an image taken 3 weeks earlier. Liam Hart and Emma Cole, sitting across from each other at a small cafe by the harbor. The timestamp didn't lie. They had met in secret. The photo wasn't romantic. Emma's expression was calm, thoughtful, serious. Liam was leaning forward, talking intently, like a man on a mission. Ethan stared at it for a long time, his knuckles whitening around the tablet. He refused to believe she was having an affair. Emma wasn't built for deception like that, but she was capable of something else. Vengeance. Maybe this wasn't about love at all. Maybe it was about exposing the man she had grown to resent. The man who built a world around power and forgot what it meant to care. Ethan called his assistant immediately. "If anyone asks about Mrs. Cole, she's on a wellness retreat. No press, no leaks, no speculation." He hung up before the assistant could respond. He poured himself a drink and caught his reflection in the dark glass of his office window. He looked powerful, composed, unbothered, but the truth behind his eyes was something darker. He wasn't chasing her out of heartbreak anymore. He was chasing her out of necessity. She had the black box, and whatever she planned to do with it could destroy him completely. That night, when he returned to the penthouse, the air felt different. The rain had stopped, leaving the city outside, washed and glistening under streetlights. Ethan sat at his desk and unfolded the note again, reading it under the soft glow of his desk lamp. His eyes caught something he had missed before: faint coordinates, written in tiny letters at the bottom of the page. Barely visible, almost like a secret message meant only for him. He entered the coordinates into his phone. They led to a small coastal town, 3 hours away. He didn't hesitate. Within minutes, he was behind the wheel of his black Aston Martin, cutting through the night as the highway opened before him like a silver ribbon. The city lights faded behind him, replaced by endless stretches of darkness and the distant shimmer of the ocean ahead. When he arrived, the air was cold and heavy with salt. Waves crashed against the shore, the sound carrying through the quiet streets of the sleeping town. The coordinates led him to an abandoned warehouse near the docks. It looked empty, lifeless, except for the faint silhouette of someone standing outside. As his headlights swept across the cracked concrete, the figure turned. Liam Hart. Ethan stepped out of the car, his expression carved from stone. The wind off the ocean whipped through his hair, carrying the faint echo of tension between them. Liam's voice was calm when he spoke. "I was wondering when you'd find the note." Ethan's reply was sharp, controlled, but beneath it was fire. "Where is she?" Liam slipped his hands into his coat pockets, his face unreadable. She doesn't want to be found. Ethan took a step closer, his tone dropping to something that could freeze steel. You think I'm going to let you disappear with my wife and my data? Liam gave a quiet, almost pitying smile. She's not your prisoner anymore. You built her a cage, Ethan, and now she's finally walked out of it. Ethan's jaw clenched. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I do, Liam said softly, pulling a small flash drive from his pocket and holding it between two fingers. You built a company on secrets, but she finally realized she was one of them. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. Give it to me. Liam shook his head slowly. No, because for once, she deserves to be free of you. Then, before Ethan could move, Liam threw the flash drive into the darkness. It vanished into the waves with a distant splash, swallowed by the sea. Ethan lunged forward, but Liam was already gone, slipping into the shadows like smoke. The sound of crashing surf filled the air, raw and endless, echoing against the metal walls of the empty dock. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring into the black water where the flash drive had disappeared, his reflection rippling in the waves. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the hunter, he was the one being played. Emma hadn't just left him. She was dismantling him piece by piece, and he had no idea how far she planned to go. And for Ethan Cole, that realization was more terrifying than losing her. It meant she was winning. Ethan Cole didn't return to the city that night. He sat in his car by the abandoned dock long after Liam had vanished, the waves crashing against the shore as the truth started to take shape in his mind. Emma hadn't simply left to find peace. She had planned this carefully, quietly, with precision that mirrored his own methods in business. She had taken the black box, used his signature to cover her tracks, and even brought back a man who had every reason to destroy him. But what was inside that box that she wanted? The black box wasn't just data. It was a vault of Ethan's private archives, old recordings, confidential acquisitions, and sealed communications that could expose the very foundation of his empire. If Emma had opened it, she knew things about him no one else ever had. The thought alone made his pulse turn to ice. He finally started the engine and drove off, the city lights reappearing hours later as dawn painted the skyline in muted gray. He parked beneath the tower that bore his name, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a threat. By the time he stepped into his office, his team was already waiting with updates. His security chief reported that Emma's accounts were clean, no withdrawals, no card activity, no traceable purchases. His digital analyst added that her phone had been deactivated 2 hours after she left, and her email had been systematically wiped. Every trace of her was disappearing, methodically, almost professionally. Ethan realized she had prepared for this for months. That realization cut deeper than anything else. She had been planning her escape while sleeping next to him every night, smiling across the breakfast table, asking him how his meetings went. He had been blind, and she had been 10 steps ahead. He dismissed everyone except one person, his chief strategist, Adrian Vega. Adrian had been with him for years, the only person Ethan trusted to speak freely. When Adrian entered, he studied Ethan carefully. You look like you haven't slept in days, he said quietly. Ethan ignored the comment. She took the black box. He said instead, voice low but sharp, and she's working with Liam Hart. Adrian's expression shifted instantly. Liam, that's impossible. Ethan's eyes were cold. No, it's strategic. He's the only one who knows where my vulnerabilities are, and Emma's the only one who knows where it hurts. Adrian hesitated. You think she's doing this to expose you? Ethan turned toward the glass wall, his reflection overlapping with the city outside. No, he said slowly. She's doing this to make me feel what she felt, powerless. For the next 2 days, Ethan worked in silence. His team thought he was handling the situation rationally, but inside, he was spiraling between anger, fear, and a growing unfamiliar sense of guilt. He reviewed every hidden file, every secret project he had buried inside that black box. There were things in there he'd never planned for anyone to see, mergers that skirted legal lines, confidential deals with foreign investors, private recordings of conversations with regulators, even encrypted files related to his competitors. It was enough to end him publicly if it ever saw daylight. But one file in particular stopped him cold. It was labeled EC Personal Archive 07. Inside were recordings, audio files of private arguments, late-night calls, and even personal memos he'd made about Emma. Some of them were harsh, some were cruel. They were never meant for her to hear. And if she had found them, if she had listened, then maybe the note she left wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about truth. That night, he sat alone in his penthouse, the city glittering below, the noise of traffic humming like a distant reminder of the life he'd built. His phone buzzed again, another untraceable message. This time, not from Emma, a video link. He hesitated, then tapped it open. The screen lit up with an image of him at a board meeting 3 years ago, one that had never been made public. His voice was clear, his tone commanding as he gave an order to manipulate a rival company's stock through back-channel influence. The video ended abruptly. Then came a line of text beneath it. This is just one file. Think carefully before you decide to chase me again. Ethan's breath caught. Whoever sent this had access to the black box. Emma wasn't bluffing anymore. She was threatening to bring down everything. He slammed his hand against the desk, the glass surface cracking under the force. For the first time, his composure broke. This wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It was about survival. If she leaked that data, he'd face investigations, shareholder rebellion, and possibly prison. Everything he had built, every empire he'd constructed, would collapse in a single headline. He grabbed his phone and called his private investigator. "Find her," he said. His voice was hoarse, raw. "I don't care what it takes, who you pay, or what you have to do. Find Emma Cole." Days turned into nights as the search expanded. Emma's trail led nowhere. She had left the country under a different name, using an identity that wasn't hers. Every lead turned cold. Every trace vanished. It was as if she had been erased from existence. Then, one night, Ethan received a call from a blocked number. He answered instantly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then her voice came through, steady, heartbreakingly familiar. "You shouldn't have come looking for me," she said. He froze, unable to speak. "Emma," he whispered finally, "you don't understand what you've done." She laughed softly, not out of amusement, but sadness. "I understand perfectly. I took back the truth." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "You're destroying everything." Her tone turned cold. "Everything you built was already broken." "Ethan, I'm just showing the world what you hide." His voice dropped. "If you do this, you'll regret it." She paused, her breath catching faintly through the line. "I already do," she said, and then the call ended. Ethan stood there, staring at the phone screen as the silence swallowed the room again. For the first time, he felt fear, not of losing power, but of losing control over the one person who knew how to unravel him completely. He knew she was serious. The woman who once waited for him at home was gone. The woman on the other end of that line was someone else, someone colder, sharper, and more determined than he had ever imagined. And the worst part was that deep down, a part of him respected her for it. The next morning, his investigator finally brought something tangible, a location hit from a security camera near the northern coast. A woman resembling Emma had checked into a private villa registered under a false name, using cash. Ethan didn't hesitate. He boarded his helicopter within the hour. As the coastline came into view beneath him, he stared out the window at the waves far below, thinking about what he would say when he saw her. Would he beg, threaten, apologize? Even he didn't know. All he knew was that he had to see her one last time. When the helicopter touched down, the wind whipped through his coat. The villa stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the ocean. It was quiet, peaceful to peaceful, the kind of place someone chose when they didn't plan to come back. He walked up the stone steps slowly, heart pounding, until he reached the door. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the lights were low, the air faintly scented with her perfume. On the table, there was another envelope, his name written on it, in that same familiar slanted handwriting. For a moment, he couldn't move. His fingers trembled as he picked it up, breaking the seal open. "Ethan," the note began, "if you're reading this, it means you didn't stop. I told you not to follow me. I told you to let me go. You built a world that had no room for love, only power. And now, that power is what's going to undo you. I didn't want to destroy you, but you left me no choice. You'll find the truth soon, and when you do, maybe you'll finally see the man you became." Ethan's eyes moved to the bottom of the letter. There was a small drive taped there, black and unmarked. It wasn't the black box, it was something else, a message, or maybe a weapon. Either way, it was from her. He pulled it free and stared at it for a long moment before sliding it into his pocket. Whatever was on it, He knew it would change everything. Ethan stood frozen in the quiet of the villa. The soft crash of the waves outside, the only sound breaking through the silence. The letter still trembled in his hand, the words echoing through his mind with every breath. She had written it calmly, deliberately, almost gently, but each line felt like a knife carefully pressed between his ribs. It wasn't anger that drove her now, it was resolve. She hadn't disappeared to hurt him, she had disappeared to make him face himself. The small black drive weighed in his pocket like a ticking clock. He could feel its presence with every step, as though it carried the pulse of something alive, something dangerous. He walked through the villa slowly, taking in every trace of her. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, a cup half full on the kitchen counter, a throw blanket on the sofa. She had lived here briefly, but long enough to leave her presence imprinted on the walls. It wasn't a hideout. It was a place of transition. She had stayed here just long enough to send him this final message, to leave him standing in the ruins of his control. He sat down on the couch, the letter still in his hand, and took out the flash drive. It was unmarked, no logo, no hint of its origin. He plugged it into his laptop, hesitating only for a second before the screen came to life. A video opened automatically. Emma appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a small office, her hair tied back, eyes steady and clear. There was no trace of the soft warmth she used to carry when she smiled at him. This Emma was different, colder, but not cruel, just sure. "If you're watching this," she began, her voice low but unwavering, "then you found the villa. Oh, I knew you would. You always need to win, Ethan. You need to prove you're smarter, stronger, faster. But this isn't a game anymore." She paused, her gaze cutting straight through the screen, making him feel as though she was still right there in front of him. "I took the black box because I needed you to see what you've done, what you've become. It's not about the money or the power, it's about the truth. The people you hurt, the deals you buried, the lies you told yourself to make it all seem justified. I tried to reach you, Ethan. I tried to make you listen, but you only hear when someone takes something from you. So I took what mattered most." Ethan's throat tightened as he leaned closer to the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes didn't waver. "You think this is about revenge," she continued, "but it's not. It's about release. You built a world where everything was a transaction, even love. I don't hate you. I just refuse to be another one of your assets." She looked down briefly, then back up again. "By now, you've realized I didn't destroy anything. I only copied it. The black box is still secure. I didn't leak it, though I could have. What I did was share it with the people who helped you build your empire, the people who believed in you, the ones you forgot along the way. They deserve to know the truth too. Maybe they'll hold you accountable in ways I couldn't." She exhaled softly, almost like a sigh of relief. "This isn't the end, Ethan. It's the beginning of something different. For both of us." The video cut off, leaving only the quiet hum of the laptop. Ethan sat there motionless for a long time, the glow of the screen casting shadows across his face. He wanted to be furious. He wanted to destroy the laptop, the letter, the memory of her voice. But underneath the fury was something heavier, something he hadn't felt in years: guilt. Because deep down, he knew she was right. He had crossed lines, rationalized corruption, treated people like tools, all while convincing himself it was for a greater vision. Emma had been the last part of him that wasn't built on ambition, and he had driven her away the same way he drove everyone else, by putting the empire above everything human. He closed the laptop and stood, pacing across the room as the first light of dawn began to touch the windows. He needed to think. He needed to regain control, but every path forward seemed uncertain now. If Emma had truly distributed copies of his files, there was no stopping what might come next. He could face audits, lawsuits, even criminal investigations. The empire could crumble overnight. For the first time in his life, there was no strategy that could fix this. He picked up the letter again, reading the final lines until the words blurred. "You'll find the truth soon. And when you do, maybe you'll finally see the man you became." The words rang in his head like a curse. He walked out to the balcony overlooking the cliff, the wind pulling at his clothes as he stared out at the endless horizon. The ocean below looked wild and unrestrained, the waves breaking violently against the rocks. It reminded him of her, beautiful, unpredictable, and untamable. A part of him admired her for what she'd done. She had managed to do something no rival, no competitor, no enemy had ever done. She made him powerless. But Ethan Cole wasn't built to stay powerless. He turned from the ocean, his eyes hardening. He wasn't going to let this destroy him. He was going to rebuild, and this time, he'd do it in a way that no one could touch. Within hours, he was back in his jet, heading home. He didn't speak a word during the flight. His mind was already moving, calculating, planning. When he landed, the news had already begun to break. Anonymous leaks tied to call dynamics, mentions of offshore accounts and hidden acquisitions. Nothing confirmed, but enough to ignite rumors. By the time he reached his office, stock prices were beginning to dip. His PR team was panicking. His legal counsel was calling every minute, and his board members were demanding answers. Ethan walked into the chaos with the same calm he always carried, but his silence spoke louder than any press statement. Adrian rushed to meet him as he entered the boardroom. "We need to issue a denial immediately," he said. "The press is tearing this apart." Ethan sat down at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "No denials," he said. "That'll only make them dig deeper." Adrian stared at him in disbelief. "Then what's the plan?" Ethan leaned forward, eyes cold and focused. "We find who she sent it to, every person who received the data, every contact she used. We cut off the flow before it hits the public, and if anyone tries to use it against me, we make sure they regret it." His voice was calm, but the fire behind it was unmistakable. This wasn't a man broken. This was a man preparing for war. That night, while his team worked tirelessly to contain the fallout, Ethan opened a secure file on his private system. It was labeled Cold Initiative. It contained plans for a massive restructuring, a way to shift assets, erase digital footprints, and consolidate control into a new entity. It was ruthless, efficient, and designed for one purpose: survival. As he stared at the screen, something flickered in the corner of his mind, a memory of Emma's voice saying, "You'll finally see the man you became." He wondered if she'd known this would happen, if she'd known that in trying to destroy his empire, she would only make him build a stronger one. But as he looked out at the city lights that night, one thought haunted him. In all his years of winning, this was the first time victory felt like loss. He closed his laptop, his reflection staring back at him in the dark glass. There was no trace of regret on his face, only determination. Yet deep inside, buried under layers of pride and control, something had cracked open, a quiet awareness that no amount of money or power could seal again. Emma had taken his secrets, but she had left him with something far more dangerous: self-awareness. And for a man like Ethan Cole, that was a wound that could never fully heal. The world was closing in on Ethan faster than he could react. Overnight, the financial networks were buzzing, the media in a frenzy. Anonymous sources had leaked portions of the black box data mails, transaction logs, coded exchanges that hinted at corporate manipulation, insider trading, and concealed takeovers. None of it was definitive yet, but the scent of blood had drawn every journalist, regulator, and rival like sharks to the water. His empire, once untouchable, was now trembling under the weight of exposure. Coal Dynamics had always projected strength, precision, discipline, dominance, but now the cracks were showing, and everyone could see that the fortress wasn't made of steel. It was made of glass. Inside the glass tower of his headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. The halls that once echoed with power and control now carried whispers of uncertainty. Employees avoided eye contact, investors demanded reassurance, and security teams doubled their presence. Ethan stood by the window of his corner office, looking down at the city below. It looked smaller now, as if the skyline itself was mocking him. He'd built this empire piece by piece, sacrificing everything, believing he could outsmart fate, morality, and emotion. But Emma had undone years of strategy with a single act of defiance, a letter, and a flash drive. His phone vibrated on the desk. A message from Adrian: "The board's calling an emergency session in 30 minutes. They want to discuss your position." Ethan read it twice, his jaw tightening. He knew what that meant. They were preparing to push him out, to save the company's image before the storm consumed them all. He walked over to the mirror across the room and stared at himself. The reflection staring back looked like a stranger, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened, the weight of sleepless nights dragging down his posture. For the first time, he saw the cost of everything he'd done, everything he'd built. He had become the image of the man he once swore he'd never be. Powerful, yes, but hollow. When the board meeting began, the air was thick with tension. The directors sat around a long table, their faces grave, voices low. Screens displayed the latest headlines, stock charts bleeding red, One of them, a grey-haired man named Langford, cleared his throat. "Ethan, this situation has escalated beyond our control," he said cautiously. "The leaks are spreading faster than we can contain them. The sex involved. The media is tearing us apart. We need to take action before this destroys the company." Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Langford. "What kind of action?" he asked. Langford hesitated, glancing around the table. "You need to step down. Temporarily at least. Let us appoint an interim CEO. It'll calm the markets." Ethan smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "You think my absence will calm the markets? You think replacing me will make this go away?" His voice was calm but edged with steel. "You built this company on my name, my vision, my decisions. Every one of you profited because I was willing to take the risks you were too afraid to take. And now, when it's inconvenient, you want to erase me." Silence filled the room. Langford looked down. Others shifted uncomfortably. Finally, Adrian spoke. "Ethan, we're not erasing you. We're protecting what's left." Ethan stood up slowly, resting both hands on the table. "What's left?" he repeated softly. "You think this company is what's left? The buildings, the assets, the stock price." His gaze swept the room, sharp and unwavering. "What's left is the truth, and you can't protect yourself from that." Then he turned, walking out before anyone could respond. The doors closed behind him with a dull thud that echoed through the hall like the end of an era. By the time evening came, the board had released a statement announcing Ethan's temporary leave. It hit every major outlet within minutes, accompanied by footage of him walking out of the building, flanked by security. To the world, it looked like a fall from grace. To Ethan, it was an opening, because while they thought he was retreating, he was already setting his next move in motion. He had a private network of contacts, people outside the system, loyal not to Coal Dynamics, but to him personally. The black box may have shaken his empire, but it hadn't destroyed his reach. If Emma thought she could end him with truth, she had underestimated how much darkness truth could survive. That night, he met with an old associate in a dimly lit restaurant on the edge of the city. Marcus Vale, former cybersecurity specialist, now a digital mercenary. "I heard about your little scandal," Marcus said with a smirk. "Didn't think you'd fall this hard, Cole." Ethan didn't react. "I need you to find someone," he said simply. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, the wife." Ethan didn't answer, which was answer enough. Marcus leaned back, the smirk fading. "You really want to go down that road? She's not the enemy, man. She's the only person who ever stood up to you." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly why I need to find her." There was a pause, heavy and cold. Marcus finally nodded. "I'll find her, but whatever you're planning, just know it's not going to end the way you think." Days turned into weeks, and the fallout spread like wildfire. Ethan's face was on every screen, every headline dissecting his downfall. Yet behind the chaos, he was moving in silence, building something new, something hidden. He transferred key assets into offshore entities, restructured digital infrastructures, and began forming a new corporation under a different name. He was erasing Ethan Cole from existence and replacing him with someone else. But even as he moved deeper into secrecy, her voice haunted him. Every night, when the world was quiet, he could hear her words replaying, "You'll finally see the man you became." And he did. But instead of breaking him, it was reshaping him. One evening, as rain hammered against the glass of his new office, his encrypted phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Found her." There was an address attached. Ethan's pulse quickened. He hesitated only for a moment, before grabbing his coat and heading out. The address led him to a quiet part of the countryside, far from the noise of the city. When he arrived, the air was damp, filled with the scent of earth and rain. The house was small, warm light glowing through the windows. He stood at the door for a long time before finally knocking. When it opened, she was there, Emma, standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the space between them. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "You knew I'd come," he said quietly. Emma's eyes met his, steady and calm. "Of course," she replied. "You always come when something slips out of your control." He stepped closer, his voice lower, almost pleading. "You didn't just take files, Emma. You took everything. You took me." She looked at him, something soft flickering in her gaze for a split second before vanishing. "No, Ethan," she said. "I didn't take you. I freed you. You just don't know what that means yet." He exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping him. Freed me. You destroyed me. She shook her head slowly. You destroyed yourself. I just showed you the mirror. The tension between them was electric or love, regret all twisted together. He took another step forward, his voice quieter now. What if I said I want to understand? What if I said I want to change? Emma studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then she said something that cut deeper than any accusation. Change isn't something you say, Ethan, it's something you live. If you mean it, you'll prove it when no one's watching. Until then, all you'll ever be is the man who built an empire out of shadows. For the first time in years, Ethan had no words. He stood there, drenched in rain and silence, watching her close the door. As it clicked shut, he realized that all his wealth, his power, his control, none of it had ever made him invincible. What destroyed him wasn't Emma's betrayal. It was her truth. He turned and walked back into the storm, unsure of where he was going. But for the first time, he wasn't running from anything. He was just walking away from the empire, away from the lies, maybe even toward something real. And though the world saw a billionaire fallen, somewhere in the shadows of that downfall, a man was finally learning what it meant to be free.